Hello again, I am Blunty, and inside this little box is something called the Bittboy, which at first glance you'd be forgiven for thinking was yet another one of those cheapy knockoff Game Boy clones. But in fact, it's a fake! Star Trek references. Now, despite its looks, it is in fact a knockoff Nintendo Entertainment System clone, or Famicom clone. Well, not really a clone, as you can't play your own NES or Famicom cartridges. In fact, you can't even play your own ROMs, as despite a slot in the casing clearly designed for a micro SD card, there's no card slot in there. Don't even try to slide a micro SD card in there, it'll be lost. It's just a gap, it's an opening, it's a hollow, nothing. It's a fake! What you do get, however, is what they claim, on the box at least, 300 NES and Famicom games built in. Except it's not 300 games. The built-in menu selection shows a listing of just 129 games, and it's not quite 129 games either, as some of these games are listed more than once. This may seem outrageous, but it's actually pretty typical for this sort of many games in one kind of cheapy Chinese knockoff garbage. Almost none of them actually deliver on the number of games they promise. But what you do get for the $39.99 asking price is a big list of games, at least a dozen or two are well worth playing, the rest are garbage, on a tiny but still ergonomically friendly device with a remarkably good screen on it. Inside here will be one of those system-on-a-chip NES clones that have been around for ages now, and this is an older one, by the way, as evidenced by the fact that the video output option, and yes, you can connect this thing to a TV if you like, but they're tragically old-school composite connections, and thus basically useless on almost any modern screen. The two standard control buttons are flanked by turbo buttons, which is nice for those tap-to-rapid-fire type games, and they have a good sharp actuation feel to them, and a nice strong spring back. Even the D-pad feels surprisingly nice, certainly well above what I've come to expect from these little knockoffs filled with a library of legally dubious games, which I'd bet pretty heavily Nintendo never licensed for this use. On that note, the weird part here is that Bittboy, at least on the website, claims to be located in London, not China, where things like copyright and trademark infringements are, let's just say, less sharply defined. I imagine their claimed London residence might put them in a more vulnerable spot when Nintendo comes knocking on their door. But legality of the built-in games aside, it is actually a nice device. It's the screen that really sells it. We're used to seeing low-res, washed-out and monstrously motion-blurry screens on this stuff. But here, it's actually a proper IPS display panel, just 2.2 inches, but it is crystal clear, crisp as a winter's morning, and as brightly colourful as spring. The sound is pretty decent enough considering the size of the speaker, and the emulation itself feels pretty spot on, although that's no huge feat these days, as again, NES system-on-a-chip clones have been around for quite some time. The whole thing runs from a rechargeable and replaceable, so that's nice, lithium-ion battery of just 500 mAh, which seems to last okay, certainly long enough for a decent gaming session for these types of games, but there's no indication of battery status, so that's kind of annoying, and it charges over USB, which makes life really easy. So even if it does manage to go flat on your way or out and about, or on a plane for example, you can just charge it up with one of those battery bank things. All in all, I think the $40 asking price is a bit much, especially considering, again, I seriously doubt the game library is legitimately licensed, and I do wish you could use your own ROMs, of course. I mean, come on, if you're gonna go this far, you may as well open that door. Also, Game Boy emulation would seem like a logical step too, or even Game Boy Advance emulation. Ooh. Now, compared to playing emulated NES and Famicom games on, say, your phone, for example, as I'm sure even before you finish watching the video, many of you have already left comments about, probably in a pissy, snark-filled tone, it actually feels much better here, of course. Having real controls, and decent ones at that, makes a huge difference in playability, particularly to many of these games which require decisive input. And yes, I know you can get Bluetooth controllers for your phones and stuff, but Bluetooth comes with an inherent lag in it, and blah blah blah, discussion, whatever. At the end of the day, this thing is only really worth it for the curious collectors, the retro nerds, and maybe something that shut a small child up for a while on a car trip. I don't expect this thing to sell like hotcakes, but it would be fair to call this the best of such devices I've ever tried. Thanks for watching, I am Blunty, and I'll catch you next time.